It is time. The past 6 months of my life spent preparing have built up to this moment, spending nearly 200 hours making a huge hole in the ground and making tons of farms all just for this one mega project. This is how I transformed this empty area into this. The main item that we're going to need lots of is stone, and luckily we made this farm last episode. Yeah, this isn't going to be fast enough. That's why I built this upgraded farm by El Mango. There we go, that's much better. The next thing that we're going to need lots of is moss, and luckily when I was running the bone meal farm last episode, I made one of the sections just output moss, so it should already have more than what I need. This build is going to need a lot of stripped wood, so using the bone meal produced from the farm, I started collecting everything that I'm going to need, plus a little extra just in case. Once I finished getting the spruce wood, I started gathering the birch wood. And of course, with my luck, it did not go smoothly. Halfway through, I ran out of bone meal, and after looking around for a while pretending like I knew what I was doing, I was able to fix the problem with the bone meal and get back to planting trees. After collecting all the birch wood I needed, I switched the farm to oak mode and AFK'd for another 2 hours. I brought all the shulkers full of the wood back to my base, where I spent just over an hour turning the logs into full wood blocks so that they could be stripped in the converter I built last episode. In order to strip the wood, I made a few unbreaking diamond axes that I wouldn't feel bad about breaking since I had so many diamonds from digging the hole. And just like that, I got to work. And finally, after a few short hours, I finished oak, spruce, and birch. Let's go! The next item on the list that I needed was andesite, 26,000 to be exact. Luckily, it can be crafted by putting 2 cobblestone and 2 quartz in a crafting table like this, you get 2 diorite. And by combining 1 diorite with 1 cobblestone, you get 2 andesite. So that means that in total, I'm going to need to get 13,000 quartz and 26,000 cobblestone. The cobblestone is easy enough to get, but gathering quartz is a whole different story. At first, I started by pickle bartering, and after realizing that that was a lost cause, I tried strip mining. This method was okay and came with the added benefit of finding ancient debris. Oh, sick. It was when I was flying home when I finally discovered the most efficient way of getting quartz, just by flying around in an open area and mining any that I could find. And after a few hours, I was done. When I got back home, I had to replace all of the quartz so that I could mine it with my Fortune 3 pickaxe in order to get the total amount of quartz I needed. After realizing that that would take too long, I built this machine that would allow me to AFK the whole process. With the quartz done, the next item I needed was sea pickles for decorations and also to smelt down into lime dye for the terracotta. And for some reason, I could not find a coral reef anywhere close to where I live, so I flew for nearly an hour until I finally came across the smallest reef that I've ever seen. Because of its lack of pickles, I built this sea pickle farm designed by Trilomes in order to get the rest that I needed. After finishing the farm, I turned it on and AFK'd for about an hour and a half until I had all of the sea pickles I needed and headed home. I brought them back to the super smelter to turn them into lime dye for the terracotta. Once they were all done, I went back home and AFK'd at the iron farm and came back to a wonderful surprise. Once I finished fixing my house, I set off to gather the 5,000 endstone I would need for the build. Now, endstone is a really slow block to mine, even with haste, so I used an odd method to gather a bunch real quick. By spawning a wither and punching it every so often, I can make it break a 4x3 area really fast. After losing track of time, I decided that it was time to kill the wither and gather everything that had dropped, but by the time I reached the end of the tunnel, stuff had already started despawning. Being just slightly past halfway, I had no choice but to mine the rest manually. After about an hour and a half of gathering, I returned home and placed the shulkers with the rest of the supplies over at the hole. Now that I had moving shulkers on my mind, I also decided to move all the stripped wood over. The second last block I needed to gather was 34,000 tough. Now there's no way around this. There's no farm or strategy out there to streamline this process, so using the iron from the iron farm, I made a beacon and started mining. After mining every block in range of the beacon, I built a few more. And finally, after 5 hours of mining and several trips to repair my pickaxes, I was on to the final block. I traveled back to the Badlands biome where I built the sea pickle farm, built a beacon, and got straight to work. It feels very unnatural using a diamond to power this thing. And finally, after about another 4 hours of mining, I had everything I needed. All that was left was to turn them into lime terracotta, and so that's exactly what I did. I flew back and got straight to crafting. Finally, after about 10 minutes of crafting and nearly a week of preparation, I checked off the last item on my list of materials and was ready to start building. I watched the sunset on day 1191 and mentally prepared for the upcoming days of placing blocks. I moved all the materials over, and the next morning, I started placing. I started by creating all of the bodies of water just to kind of get the lay of the land and begin with something easy. At first, everything was very slow, figuring out how much of each item I needed and the most optimal way of organizing them in my inventory. But as with all things, with more time spent, the faster and better things got. After about 5 hours of placing blocks, I had finally started the shores and began to really see some progress. Once I had placed every block that was at or below sea level, it was ready to be flooded. After an additional hour of spamming water buckets, everything was flooded and it was finally time to start on the mountains. Building the first mountain felt very slow, and it was kinda hard to stay focused and motivated, but I managed to persevere and truck through. It was at this point that my OBS had an update, and in doing so, it vomited up all of my settings for the file outputs. So unfortunately, the clips for the next 4 minutes are going to look like a potato was used to record everything. At hour 15 in the build, I finally finished the first of 7 peaks, and shortly after, the first mountain was done. Just to feel a little more accomplished, I finished the arch that connects the 2 mountain ranges together. The next easy part to finish was the cave that attaches the 2 lakes together and acts as a path through the mountain and will eventually lead to another build. Once that was done, I was ready to start on the next mountain. Now this one is one really big base with several peaks coming out of it. This time, rather than building the whole thing all at once, I built it in smaller pieces to feed my dopamine-hungry brain. It was also at this point where the project was going at a snail's pace due to having to sleep every night because of the mobs, so I decided to make a mob switch designed by ENXO4 to fix that. That is not supposed to do that. With the mob switch working and absolutely no mob in sight, it was finally time to crack down on this project and lock in. Finally, after around 40 hours of placing blocks, I was in what seemed to be the home stretch. With only 2 peaks left to build, I was merely hours away from completing the most time-consuming project I have ever undertaken. Final peak, let's go! As I placed the last couple of blocks to finish the final peak, I was completely overwhelmed by a complete roller coaster of emotions. I was overjoyed as this was the first mega project that I had ever finished, and also very proud of myself for sticking it out until the end. The past 5 months have been leading up to this moment. I felt pretty sad to see the culmination of a project that I worked so hard on, but it's these feelings that make me love Minecraft, to release your imagination and build something really truly beautiful. So thank you all so much for watching and following alongside me on this journey. I still have big plans for this world, so make sure to subscribe and watch out for the next one. And if you're not already caught up, check out the playlist shown on screen.